Hello and good day. Today I'll talk about how to create your rationale for a course, and to use as a case study is a scenario where you are asked to create a course that would teach nationalism and citizenship. And to basically provide you with a much wider context, I will be using the instructional quality framework by Merrill in analyzing quality of instructional design. There are four elements that we should be cognizant of in relation to the design, or the elements of the design. So we have the purpose of the instruction, objective of the instruction, test of the instruction, and presentations of the instruction. According to the framework, there will have to be consistency between objectives of the instruction and the purpose of the instruction. I will give more details on that as we discuss the development of the rationale for the nationalism and patriotism course. And of course, there will have to be a consistency also between the objectives and the test. We all know that those who have undergone instructional design, you know that the test should always be a measure of achievement of intended learning outcome. You cannot be testing things or issues or content not related to the objectives of the instruction. And of course, there will also have to be a consistency between how you teach and how the students will be tested. Meaning, if your student will be tested in, say, in an essay format, clinical reasoning, then your teaching method should encourage or should develop that particular competency, critical thinking. Not only that, the objectives, for example, the product of your consistency between purpose and objectives will be, as I said earlier, consistent, but they will have to be adequate or enough to represent the competency requirement of the purpose of your instruction. And the test will also have to be adequate to totally, or to at least provide a very comprehensive measurement of achievement of the intended learning outcome. And the presentation of the instructions will have to be also adequate to make sure that the outcomes will be learned by your students. Okay. Now, let's go to the nationalism and patriotism course, for example, that we will, in a way, propose. For example, you will propose this course. So, one of the first things that you will have to do is to think of the context. Why will you open a course like this one? Or why will you be proposing a course? And in the context, for example, of nationalism and patriotism, you probably would say a lot is happening in our country today. Let's say, for example, there is a growing observation of national apathy. People don't care. Young people are not participating in election, for example, or very few people are actually going to the streets to protest some of the things that's going on in the national level. Now we're just facing a very controversial topic, the issue of corruption in the government, for example, because of the, as evidenced by some non-existent flood control projects. But how many people are actually showing indignation for this? So we don't see that much. Now, so just national apathy. So we're talking about, that the politician is probably corrupt, but nevertheless, you will vote the same person the next time, or that the person doesn't even know the concept of governance, and still you voted for that person to be in Senate or Congress. Because of the apathy. I mean, you don't care. You vote a personality, movie personality. You vote a lawyer, or you vote a teacher, a doctor. The same. Nothing will change in the governance. So, and even for example, in some news, like in 2018, for example, that 34 moviegoers arrested for not standing up to sing Lupang Hinirang inside the cinema, right? And standing up for Lupang Hinirang is supposed to be the demonstration of our nationalism and patriotism. And as I said earlier about economy and corruption, I think it seems like that corruption is not only continuing, but it's actually growing. Growing in its in terms of cost, and this corruption is actually causing death. For example, if you have a very poor flood control project or some government projects not being developed or poorly developed, then it can cause massive, massive impact like landslides, flooding, and recently we are seeing an increasing case of leptospirosis. People have been because people have to wade in the flood to go to market, to go to school. So there's so much going on, but people seem not to you don't see that kind of enthusiasm or energy to participate in that kind of movement that would help change the current system. Is this national apathy therefore a reflection of our current state of nationalism? Or should the more appropriate question be, do we even have a concept of nationalism to speak of? So, if you are to develop a course and you develop the Rationale, you have to, when you are to review your curriculum, as I mentioned earlier, you have to check the consistency between your statement of purpose and your statement of intended outcomes. And just for example, in the case of nationalism, patriotism, some people are wondering, even in our national, uh, meeting, for example, or faculty conference, or even in our just regular curriculum meeting, some people were talking about teaching, for example, nationalism. What exactly is that? Why do I have to do that in my course? Or why do we have to include that as part of the 10 CHED program outcomes? But really, teaching nationalism is a constitutional mandate. It is embedded in our 1987 Constitution, Section 3, 1.1. All educational institutions shall include the study of Constitution as part of the curriculum. Section 3.2, they shall inculcate patriotism and nationalism. So, technically, we all have to teach because it's mandated by the Constitution. As I would like to highlight here, the 3.1, that all educational institutions shall include the study of the Constitution as part of the curriculum. So you have not only identified the requirement for a nationalism course, but also that it will have to, may have to be implemented as a response to the constitutional mandate, but probably the issue is where do you do that? Where do you do that in the elementary level, high school level, and do we really need that thing to include that in our college education curricula? Again, this is what exactly I'm talking about: patriotism, nationalism, foster love of humanity, respect of human rights, appreciation of the role of national heroes in the historical development of the country, teach the rights and duties of citizenship, and release and go on. You can read all the section 3.2 of the Constitution, and indeed we are all mandated to do so. So again, teaching nationalism is a constitutional mandate. But who exactly are the people that we should be teaching about nationalism and citizenship, and also in the context of nation building? Then we have to go back to the Constitution and look at Article 4, citizenship, because this defines. The article defines who are the citizens of the Philippines, as shown here. You have the different types. We all know that when we were in elementary and high school, the natural born, or citizens of the Philippines who marry aliens, but they basically would stay, or to the particular partner will decide to be naturalized. So there are so many ways of becoming a citizen of the republic. And therefore, if you're a citizen of the republic, then you have to be to demonstrate nationalism and of course participation in nation building because you're a citizen of the republic. And just to highlight it, these are the following, and we can continue. So the next question is: Is this limited requirement for citizenship a factor in the way we express our patriotism and sense of nationhood? Actually, let's say for example, why do we have to teach? Why do we have to take our international students? Why do we ask them to take courses when they are not necessarily Filipino citizens? That's why at one point, in one of the discussion I had, that we should actually not just focus on the issue of nationalism, because we do have new citizens in our republic. We have American citizen who eventually became Filipino citizen out of marriage, or some who basically were accepted in the Philippines as migrants or as those seeking political asylum from countries who are at war with other countries. So basically, they have their own nationalist perspective, but what we want them to really embrace is they may still be they may still embrace the nationalist thing where they came from, but what is important is they have to show or to demonstrate patriotism, because as I said earlier, there are some other Filipinos that are not necessarily born in the Philippines. Probably they have different nationality by birth, but but eventually change their citizenship to Filipino. We cannot remove from them their own nationalist, their adherence to their nationalist, beginnings or roots. But we want them to become patriots, as Filipino patriots, to participate in the activities on the nation building of the country, the second country that they have embraced. Because as it said here by Ikinobe in 2010, one needs to have a feel or sense of belonging and attachment to and special appreciation of the country and its values in order to make sacrifice and to care for it. So it's not enough that you take them to make them nationalists. They will have to embrace also the context of patriotism. So in terms of developing our courses, so nationalism is not just an issue in the Philippines to say is it a CHED guideline, is it only the Philippines, but actually nationalism is all over the world. That's a powerful thing. But the thing is, if you talk about nationalism, sometimes the idea is the government is demanding from its citizen from the top to perform or to demonstrate nationalism. So it's actually, nationalism is always a top-down. But when you talk about nation building, it's a bottom-up, when people identify with. So therefore, even if you're nationalist, because you're a national Filipino citizen, because you're now you have converted into the Filipino citizenship. By dictate of the national government, because you went into the process, you have been declared by Congress as and you are now a Filipino citizen. Or if you go to the U.S., for example, you have green card. That of course that will not still make you a Filipino American citizen, but as you are already in the U.S., for example, you should participate in the nation building in the new country where you belong, or you have embraced. So how do you do that in a country, for example, of 110 million people, 8 major dialects, and about 180 ethno-linguistic groups? So education is the key. So now we are trying to to rationalize the use of education or the use of these courses to develop citizenship, nationalism, and nation building. So we can look at literature of other schools of other countries in terms of how they define the importance of education for nation building and citizenship. Do you know that as early as during the time of Napoleon Bonaparte, Napoleon Bonaparte actually started the creation of uniform school system throughout the territory under the empire, under Napoleon's leadership. So the creation of a uniform school system and curriculum throughout the territory is basically one way to ensure that people are participant to state making, nation building. No, so it's really not something that we shed or just we just want to do it. It's important in nation building, and even for our own education for nationalism. In for example, in the Philippines, we go to the Department Order 71 of DepEd, and the teaching of edukasyong pagpakatao and civica or HEKASE. I don't know if some of you still remember HEKASE, or I didn't have HEKASE in my own time during my own elementary high school, but it basically emphasizes the demonstration of nationalism and love control of cultural heritage through singing of the pambansang awit, teaching national song, folk dances, blah blah blah. And in terms of the high school curriculum, we have the so-called Makabayan subjects. And for higher education, we have the development of responsible and effective leadership, the education of high-level and middle-level professional, and the enrichment of historical and cultural heritage, which, as I said, was not only at the Constitution, but also at the level, at the Republic Act 7722, Congress of the Philippines in 1994. So basically, we have all the laws and national laws and constitutional mandates to teach nationalism. For the UPG Task Force 2015 is we have this particular a particular mandate to the schools, or that the GE program is the embodiment of the UP tradition of liberal education to provide students with a broad perspective. And so you probably, why do we have the GE program? Again, that's in relation to our nation building and citizenship building. So you don't just create a GE for the sake of developing a GE. The GE should develop the person, the student, to become a useful citizen and active participant in the nation building. So if you are to use, for example, that in terms of looking into curriculum and nation building, you can have all other programs. So this is what we have now. The CMO 2016 demonstrate to love to one's heritage, respect for other cultures, commitment to service. That is a part of that BSN program, specifically in section 6.3, demonstrate possible citizenship and pride of being Filipino, CHED 2017. We have the educating beyond civic awareness, the independent and rational thinking citizen, that will be Department Order 71, 2009, as I mentioned earlier. And that is very much akin to the observation by Mary about American education. He asserts that while schools teach for civic awareness, at one point, it is limited to what they do and not why they do it. So that's why our courses should not only force them to sing the pambansang awit or learn the folk songs, but it's also important that our Filipino citizens would know the reason why they're being taught to be nationalist or patriot or to be part of the nation building. So we are all being asked to develop our citizen to be not only nationalist or patriot, but also rational thinking citizen and independent. So but there's some caveat here. The danger of educating for loyalty to the state, educating towards critical patriotism, is also is also at one point, if not handled properly, maybe producing a blind loyalty. Like say, loyalty to the state is not one of the legitimate aims of education. We are not educating people to be loyal to the state, but rather critical people. We know we love our country, we love the Philippines, but you should. It doesn't mean that we have to stop criticizing or participating in the national discourse related to development of the country. So it's still important that as you develop, for example, your nationalism, patriotism, citizenship courses, that you develop or participate in the development of your students' critical competencies, especially in relation to reasoning, critical thinking, and to make them participate in national building to be economically self-reliant. Because if we educate students for loyalty, for the state, we might, create citizens that would look at civil disobedience and consensus objection as something that is wrong. Kaya if you are, for example, participating in rallies in the context of several issues, people will look at you as you are not loyal to the country. But in fact, that civil disobedience is perfectly valid ways of expressing your citizenship. So citizenship, part of the citizenship is to do civil disobedience if needed, right? Because we want to participate from bottom top in the change of our country or today. So again, for the case of nationalism and citizenship, we do have our constitutional mandate. We have CHED memorandum orders, but I hope that this will not just provide you with the more of that, because that the Constitution or CMO requires us to include them in our courses. But it's important to understand that we're teaching nationalism and citizenship towards for developing critical thinkers who may utilize their rights to demand for change, especially now that we're undergoing or we're experiencing a lot of development in terms of corruption and in terms of the way we elect people and the way we employ people to government positions. So I think the focus of their nationalism and citizenship will be along that direction, not only about what is nationalism and citizenship, but rather are we developing when we develop Filipino citizens who will be active participants in the nation building, who will not be afraid to say their piece, to criticize the government if they are right, to criticize the government if they see any issues that may be detrimental to the development of people in the republic, and the development of or causing disadvantage to the vulnerable sectors of the society. So that you may end up with a list of 4 objectives based on the review of the several literature, the Constitution, memorandum, guidelines, laws promulgated by Congress, and probably you will end up with 4. And you don't just talk about acquiring or understanding the concepts, but eventually, if you go to number 4, create projects that demonstrate responsible citizenship. So it's nationalism and citizenship can actually cover all the taxonomy of Bloom's. Not because it's a nationalism citizenship course, that the project will only be, or the objective will only just to understand nationalism, citizenship. We should go beyond that. We should go, like, now that you understand the concepts, how can you express that in as a project, or express that in your daily life as a citizen of the Philippine Republic? So that's how you look at the development of curriculum. But it's also important to look at other perspective, like embedding the Filipino DNA code. So it isn't about just demonstrating, knowing nationalism and citizenship, but also that we do have a Filipino DNA that we want to develop among our citizens. And it would mean that for nationalism to happen, first and foremost, for all of us to be cognizant of core Filipino values. And understanding the values, these values can help us in selecting what proteins to cut or add in order to create a new DNA. The building block for the creation of culture and capabilities that enable continuous learning and change, that will ensure contribution to a country's socio-economic progress and prosperity. Okay. And let me just show the DNA that we have here. Yeah. So we have, for example, here when we were during the colonial time, we were being, we are being developed to have all this hiya, utang na loob, pakikisama, you nahiya ka to comment on the government. You have the utang na loob to the government. Something like that. So these are all colonial values that, well, they are important values, but it's also important that you go to the lower values here in terms of the Filipino pivotal values of pakiramdam, kapwa, kagandahang loob. These are 4 Filipino values. Not those bahala na lakas ng loob, sugod, tampo. There are core Filipino values that you may want to, probably if we have time, we'll talk about it in a more detail. And then you have, of course, other associated values, karangalan, katarungan, kalayaan. These are important values that you should, as I said, the Filipino DNA that we should embed in our nationalism and citizenship, patriotism, or nation-building courses. So that's how you develop your rationality. Why do you do the course? Because you want all these values to be there. You want the people to participate in nation building. You want the people to be part of that grassroots movement that will not only criticize, but will also be active in providing alternative or innovative approaches, so that the people of the Philippines will be developing together, and that the vulnerable sectors will be also participant and will not be outside of that development framework. I think that's how you develop your rationality. Okay, thank you.